all a very happy Ugadi. On this auspicious day, we have among us a person who needs no introduction, whose name speaks for itself for her contribution in the cultural field, especially in Kuchipudi and Villasni Natyam. I am honored to present to you all Padma Bhushan Swapna Sundari. Welcome, Guruma.
Namaste. First of all, let me wish everyone a very, very happy Ugadi and a great year to follow with good health and prosperity. Today is an auspicious day that Malvika has chosen to invite me to comment about my journey in Kuchipudi. It is Ugadi, Navroz, Padma. Other than that, it is also the first day of Chaitra Navaratri, and it also happens to be the founding day of Kuchipudi Dance Center, which I established many decades ago. It's a happy occasion to ask me to trace my journey in Kuchipudi, to share my experiences and insights with all of you. And I'd like to thank young Malvika Arora for creating this opportunity that we could come together through Kuchipudi, through our discussions, through our common interests in dance. Thank you, Malvika.
So, my first question to you is that would you like to share why you chose to specialize in Kuchipudi?
About why I chose Kuchipudi to specialize in. I was born in Chennai, and those days the popular choice was Bharatanatyam, and most children were sent to Bharatanatyam schools and teachers for learning dance. And so was I. I had a very fruitful and productive initial training phase under Srimati Neela Balasubramanian, who was teaching, I think, in Vani Mahal those days, if I remember correctly. I was too small to remember the venue. But after 3 or 4 years, my parents moved to Visakhapatnam, and my father was very keen that I should also see Kuchipudi. I did not know the difference then, but I was taken to see a performance wherein a very, very famous Kuchipudi dancer of the day performed along with a very famous Kuchipudi male dancer of the day, Shri Korada Narasimha Rao. Indrani Rahman was the lady in question who performed with him, and they were doing a dance, which I did not understand at that time, but I found it very, very attractive. I came back, and then my father asked me if I was interested in taking lessons from a guru of something that I had not learned before. So I always loved to dance as a child even. So I said okay, and in the school where I was studying, evening classes were being taken by a guru called Sri Pasmarthi Sitaramaya. I did not know his name at that time. I used to call him only Master Guy. So as a child, I learned Kuchipudi from him first. And then as we moved to various cities, my training alternated between Bharatanatyam and Kuchipudi, because Kuchipudi gurus were not living outside Andhra Pradesh those days. And finally, when I came back to Delhi and went to Chennai for visiting my grandparents, I was taken to Guru Vempati Chennasatyam Garu's academy. By that time, of course, I had finished, I wouldn't say finished, but I had trained for many years under Sri Guru Pasmarthi Sitaramaya Garu. Because he had happened to come to Delhi at the invitation of one of the eminent Telugu personalities here and started classes here. So I could continue even in Delhi when I came here as a child of 10 or 11. So my training in Kuchipudi really is in that style. That's the foundation, that old style of Kuchipudi. And then later on, as I told you, when I went to Chennai, my grandparents were keen that I should not idle away my time during holidays. And for me, my favorite hobby was dancing. Passion, hobby, whatever you want to call it. So that's how I was taken to Guru Venkatachan Satyamgaru's academy. But that did not happen before my grandmother took me to Krishnagana Sabha, where she bought tickets for a performance where Guru Venkatachan Satyamgaru was showcasing his favorite disciple, Shobha Naidu. So that was the first time I saw his style of Kuchipudi. I also found that very attractive, and then I joined his academy. He was kind enough to accept me, and then the story goes on. In further episodes, we will expand about my journey thereafter, but I think this is the starting of my engagement with Kuchipudi. So you can see that it was not really by choice, as by circumstance, that I could obtain a number of years of training of Kuchipudi, and that too from two gurus who were totally different in their approach and style. We will talk about this in detail in future episodes.
When you performed Kuchipudi early in life, what were your objectives?
My objectives, or rather targets you could call it, when I was 15 barely, and I stepped into the world of performing arts as a career dancer, or an aspiring career dancer, I had a single objective, that this was my calling and that I should spend my lifetime in the pursuit of dance. That I happened to have come on stage in the Kuchipudi style was also by accident, because my training in Bharatanatyam continued simultaneously, as I mentioned earlier, or rather in alternate phases, because there were Kuchipudi gurus who taught me, but in between there were phases of training under other gurus of Bharatanatyam, as and when my family moved to different cities. So by this time I had also trained in Bharatanatyam under stalwarts like Dakshinamurthy Pillai sir, Govindarajan Pillai sir, and so this continued, my engagement with both styles continued. It so happened that a performance fell into my lap. I will talk about it in detail in a future episode. But a performance fell into my lap because somebody saw me practicing Krishna Shabdam in the apartment where my mother was living. She had a government apartment in Delhi, and I had brought my tapes and I was practicing Krishna Shabdam in one of the rooms. And a lady who saw me doing this just remarked on it, and some days later a performance fell into my lap. How this happened, I will share with you. But that is how I came into the limelight as a Kuchipudi dancer at that age. And just as it is for any young dancer, excuse me, the objective was to make a mark in the field, be as good as I can be, work really hard, try and carve a place for myself in the field, try and excel in whatever aspect that needed attention. My mother was always there as a guiding factor and I would say a mentor almost. My father was a huge encouraging force behind me. My family was with me, and the intention was there, the passion was there. I dare say, I guess the ability was there. But to realize these, as I went along, it has become a long journey and it is going on to try and attain more and more perfection, more insights, more depth. This is an effort that goes on all my life. But as a young dancer those days, my single objective was to excel. And my passion was to do so with all my faculties and with complete dedication, hard work. And that is what really contributed to going further from that point onwards.
This brings me to another question. When you perform Kuchipudi now, what are your future objectives and concerns, if any?
Yes, there are different objectives now. There are different targets now. Not that the passion is any less, not that the commitment is any less, not that the journey is complete in any way, but it's that after so many decades have passed in the field, I'm now considered somewhat a veteran in the field of dance, and particularly in the field of Kuchipudi. I guess I've become a significant name. So with that comes a great deal of responsibility as well. So it is not enough just to be awarded and felicitated. I think with that comes a great sense of responsibility, accountability, because whatever are the features for which my dance has been recognized and I've been recognized as an artist, those features cannot be lost sight of by me. So I'm very conscious that I have a responsibility. And now when I speak about Kuchipudi or my approach to Kuchipudi or whatever dimension I have been able to give to Kuchipudi, I put a great deal of thought into it. And in teaching Kuchipudi, excuse me, to the few people that I teach, I like them to understand how I observed and absorbed various aspects of the two main Kuchipudi streams that I have learnt and I have been fortunate to imbibe. And they're very different, as I said. There's this old Yakshagana style of Kuchipudi, very, very male-oriented in terms of body work, in terms of its vigor, its dynamics. And the muscle memory of that is very, very strong. And then the style that I learned subsequently, which is softer, which is more, I could say, geared to the feminine body. So both have their beautiful features and strengths. How these made a difference to my dancing, how I could internalize these highlights and the high points of the interpretation of both these gurus, how I could mold my dance around those and eventually impart, I'd like to think I impart that too, to some people who've learned from me. This is a very interesting process. It's a kind of a synthesis that has happened over so many decades. And I'd like to talk about that definitely in detail. But right now, it will suffice to say that Kuchipudi has gone into my system and then it was processed inside with my emotive and psychological processes. It was amalgamated, and then this product is what I put out as Kuchipudi of Swapna Sundari. And so therefore, when I now come into contact with the outside world as a Swapna Sundari Kuchipudi dancer, I speak about my work with a sense of responsibility, and I like to share freely the process that I went through. And I also like to make the differences between these two streams of Kuchipudi very clear to my students in the high intensity classes. So that is my approach, and I enjoy doing that because a greater clarity emerges when you inform a young mind about the scope and span of Kuchipudi dance.
Though you are a Telugu, you lived in North India for the major part of your life. So, would you tell us how did that impact your approach towards Kuchipudi, if at all, and how did you negotiate the consequences of that impact?
That's one of the best questions I've been asked so far by any interviewer. As I mentioned, I didn't choose to come to North India. I was here by circumstance. So I was not really prepared to adapt or negotiate anything. In fact, I was not even prepared for a proper launch in Kuchipudi dance, because that too happened by circumstance. So, and I was also not prepared for the deluge of performances that followed, the offers that followed. I had been hearing that it's extremely difficult to make a career in dance. There is a lot of struggle, there is a lot of opposition, there are a lot of obstacles and so on. But I was fortunate that none of this happened. Yes, opposition there was once I made a name, but those were the usual professional rivalries and so on, and things that can be expected in competitive professions like dance. Any performing art is competitive. To that extent, yes, but that happened a few years later. Right in the beginning, I must say that audience was very warm, very enthusiastic, very welcoming. And a deluge of performances followed. I did not expect that this would happen. So I was least prepared to understand and negotiate what the implications of living in North India would be. However, I had a pillar of support in my parents. Both of them happened to be here. That was a huge moral support. So in terms of the material nitty-gritties, there was a place to live, there was a place to practice, however modest it was. There were people to guide and protect me from various things that usually young girls can be impacted by. That too, the family protection was there. Professionally speaking, the part to do with negotiation really took place a few years later, not at that early stage of 15 plus. I think I should have been about maybe 19 or 20, and I started touring very frequently abroad and all over the country, and I was getting called to the best fora. I do remember that I was called to a festival which featured Sri Vedantam, Satyanarayan Sharma and Yamini Krishnamurti, both at their peak at that time. And then I was called, to as the other, sort of the younger component of Kuchipudi. I was given an opportunity to create a ballet based on Bharatanatyam and Kuchipudi, which also fell into my lap on account of someone's cancellation. So these things just came. I never really looked out for myself or asked anybody for any opportunity. That is something which today, is a kind of a bit of an obstacle for me, because I find many people still looking for opportunities and seeking opportunities and courting those who can offer them performance platforms that I never had to do. And I find it very difficult that if that has to be done, then I wouldn't know how to do it even today. But so in that sense, I didn't really negotiate for performance space. What I did negotiate was to understand the needs and expectations of the audience, because they had seen so much of me already after the first decade of dancing, all the traditional items and everything, as I had learned them, without any interventions or any extensions of my own, So after that, as their expectation rose, I had to deliver more compositions in Kuchipudi, both from the traditional sources, also as envisioned by me. There, the need to create new compositions arose, and when you go into the area of composition, you have to be armed with the understanding of tala, of sahitya, of the language, of course, and you have to have a sort of a literary bent of mind to be able to appreciate poetry and various allied topics relating to creating new compositions. That was the growth period. Also, being in Delhi, the positive thing was that I could interact with a lot of dancers from other traditions, northern traditions. I could frequently see what they were doing, much more frequently than my contemporaries who were living in the south. So my understanding of other dance traditions also, widened. So I would say it was by circumstance that I was in North India, but I would say this was a happy, there was a happy outcome of that, and I consider that my own understanding and vision and insights about dance in general and about Kuchipudi in particular actually benefited from my being here in North India. And thereafter, of course, the ideal situation came when I would be in South India and North India whenever I wished to. Performance opportunities were there in both. So that was the happy phase which came soon after that. So being in North India has been very positive for me. I didn't have to feel deprived. I never felt deprived. On the other hand, I felt I was contributing, and perhaps I did, to creating new pathways for Kuchipudi.
Finally, we would be interested to know about your views on tradition and innovation. We look forward to listen more about these in the future segments of this series.
Innovation and tradition. Problematic terms. Because they are multi-layered in their implication, multi-layered in the way they are interpreted and understood, and this really merits an entire episode, how I view innovation and tradition. I think both are, it is something that we need to talk about, but they're not something that we could talk about lightly. Because these are terms that we hear about a lot in the performing arts, especially in the field of traditional performing arts. Because all of us and the organizers often showcase work, calling it innovation or experiment or path breaking or whatever. And some of us also showcase our work saying this is as per the authentic sources and authentic way of doing it and old, tradition and pristine and so on. These adjectives are all used very frequently and sometimes a little irresponsibly as well, if I may say so. And I'm including my own program notes of early years where many times such words were used either by my own lack of understanding or perhaps the organizers use these as they're part of the whole jargon of dance that you just pick up terminology from here and there from books and put it together and put together a synopsis. But that phase is gone. I'm glad to see that today's dancers are more informed. They come from different backgrounds, they're literate. We were the first batch of, I think, in Kuchipudi certainly, the first batch of people who did not come from a very, very conventional background, so to speak, and we had a different kind of education, and so we could come into the field and as different people, and yet go into depth of a tradition of dance. And then many others followed, and thereafter, universities came up, and there were a lot of degrees and diplomas being awarded, and now doctorates. All this happened later. Yes. Late Dr. Kanakreleji's Nalanda was there, and Shantiniketan was there, and Kalakshetra was there. There were a couple of others, but there are so many universities now where dozens and dozens and dozens of dancers come out as qualified Kuchipudi dancers, qualified in terms of being undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctorates. That has made a difference to the field in terms of their approach. They're able to celebrate more. They're trained to celebrate more, I should say. Whether I believe that one should celebrate so much or should not celebrate so much is not what we're discussing. We're discussing about the change in the quality of minds that have now flooded the dance field. Having said that, innovation and tradition are problematic terms, do need to be looked at again and again and again, because we all tend to lapse into a certain comfort zone when we use these terms. But for today, this is a curtain raiser and it's an introductory feature. So I'm not going to talk in depth about these two terms. I'm going to just tell you something about my approach. This is a sari which combines two styles. It is a sari that is traditional. It is a silk sari, hand woven, that is traditional. It is a sari woven by weavers of my native land, the Telugu land, that is traditional. Because they have a huge old tradition of weaving, both cottons and silks. And then the pallu of this, as you can see, and also here, this is it's an ikat weave, and it's a single ikat. Most people who understand saris and handlooms would understand what I mean. And then suddenly, the sari has a zone which is very plain. So this is a plain silk sari combined with an ikat, partly pallu. So you have this, the pleats in one style, the sari is in another style, the body of the sari, the pallu is in, again comes back, but in another color. Now I would call this innovation by the weaver. The weaver has brought in 3 colors. It's an innovation. Maybe now it is popular, but so far as tradition is concerned, the traditional sari was a single color sari. This is an innovation based on the tradition of weaving. So, and if it gives a good result, an interesting result, and if people like that product, why not? So, who likes innovation? This is a big question. There are people in the audience who say, no, we are purists. Many people do not understand that what they consider pure is something that has already been innovated from a previous century or previous decades. Sometimes people say, we just love experimental work. We love the kind of progressive, innovative work that people do. We are so bored with classical dance. They're so caught in a time warp. So on and so forth. So, both have their votaries, both have their critics. But the dancer is the one who has to choose. Do you have to choose? That is another question. But more often than not, dancers have chosen one way or the other. I prefer to believe that I kind of stand somewhere in between because I like my ground to be solid. So that is, tradition gives you that solidity. I like my mind to be free and creative. To me, that is innovation enough. So let's conclude this curtain raiser on that happy note, where I, wrapped in this piece of innovative tradition, can spend the rest of the day of Ugadi with this memory of the stock and this pleasant anticipation of future episodes. And once again, let me thank you, Malvika, for having initiated this dialogue. And I really look forward to being able to go in depth into different aspects of my work, and also the journey and experiences outside dance, also related to dance, of course, but a few experiences that made life interesting as a dancer. And once again, I wish everybody a very, very happy New Year. Thank God we have so many New Years in our country that almost every other fortnight we'll be, wishing each other for some festival or the other, and for several New Years. So this is a very, very positive start on an auspicious day, and I would like to welcome all of you again to join me and Malvika in future episodes. Thank you very much. Namaste.